The party lights were blinding as laughter echoed around me, but all I could hear was Ezra's voice cutting through like a knife. "Damien? Nah, he's just my roommate and a good buddy from work," he said with a forced chuckle, patting my shoulder like I was some casual acquaintance, while our friends roared with approval at his joke about single life and weekend flings. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might actually be sick right there on the hardwood floor of his colleague's Brooklyn brownstone. 2 years. 2 years of stolen weekends in the Hamptons, quiet mornings making coffee in our tiny Manhattan apartment, and whispered promises that one day we would stop hiding. And now, in front of 6 of his law firm buddies and their wives, I was reduced to a roommate. I forced a smile that felt like broken glass in my mouth and muttered something about needing fresh air. No one noticed when I slipped out the side door onto the narrow terrace overlooking the twinkling lights of the city. The September night air hit my face, cool and sharp, but it did nothing to ease the burn rising in my throat. How had we gotten here? I remembered the first time I saw Ezra at that charity gala downtown 3 years ago. He had been the sharpest guy in the room, dark hair perfectly styled, suit tailored like it was made for him, laughing with partners from his firm while I stood awkwardly by the bar nursing a gin and tonic. I was just a graphic designer fresh off a big campaign for a tech startup, invited because my boss knew someone who knew someone. Ezra caught my eye across the room and held it a second too long. That was all it took. We started slow, careful. Coffee that turned into dinner, dinner that turned into late-night talks on my rooftop in Astoria. He told me about growing up in a small town outside Dallas, parents who still sent him Bible verses every Sunday, older brother who was a youth pastor. Coming out wasn't an option back then, and somehow it never became one even after he moved to New York for law school. I understood. My own parents in Seattle had taken it better than most, but even they still asked if I was sure every holiday. So we kept it quiet. Shared apartment for cost reasons, separate bedrooms when family visited, no photos on social media, no hand-holding in public. It was supposed to be temporary. Until it wasn't. Now here I was, 31 years old, staring at the Empire State Building glowing in the distance, wondering if I had spent the last 2 years building a life on quicksand. The terrace door slid open behind me. I didn't turn around. I knew it was him before he spoke. "Damien, come on, man. It was just a joke." His voice was low, the same tone he used when he was trying to close a difficult case. I finally faced him. Ezra stood there in his crisp button-down, sleeves rolled up, looking every bit the successful attorney he was. But his eyes, those deep brown eyes that had looked at me with so much love in the dark, were flickering with panic. "Just a joke." My voice cracked despite how hard I tried to keep it steady. "You told them I'm your roommate. After everything." He glanced back toward the party, making sure the door was closed. "You know how these guys are. Half of them still think being gay is a phase. If word gets back to the partners." He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. "My promotion is up for review next month." One whisper and it's gone. I wanted to scream. Instead I just nodded, the motion feeling mechanical. "Right? Your promotion." The silence stretched between us like a live wire. Finally he reached out, fingers brushing my arm, but I stepped back. "Don't. Not here." I left the party without saying goodbye to anyone. The subway ride back to our apartment in Murray Hill was a blur of fluorescent lights and indifferent strangers. When I walked through the door, the place felt different. Smaller, colder. His coffee mug from this morning still sat in the sink, the one with the tiny chip on the handle that I always teased him about. I sank onto the couch and let the tears come. Not loud sobs, just quiet ones that shook my shoulders and made my chest ache. How many times had I told myself it was worth it, that his love was real even if the world couldn't see it? Tonight that lie had finally cracked wide open. By the time Ezra got home 3 hours later, I had already packed a bag. Not everything, just enough for a few nights. He froze in the doorway when he saw it. "What are you doing?" I zipped the duffel shut and stood up. "I need space, Ezra. I can't keep pretending this is okay. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbing my wrist gently but firmly. Baby, please. Let's talk about this. The nickname hit harder than any slap. Pulled away. You called me your roommate in front of people who matter to you. What is there to talk about? He opened his mouth, closed it again. For the first time in our relationship, Ezra looked truly lost. I panicked. I swear it won't happen again. But the damage was done. I slept on the couch that night while he stayed in the bedroom. The next morning I left before he woke up, heading to my friend Marcus's place in Queens. Marcus had been my college roommate, straight as an arrow but the best ally anyone could ask for. He took one look at my face when I showed up on his doorstep and pulled me into a hug. Tell me everything. So I did. Over burnt toast and strong coffee, I laid it all out. The denial, the fear in Ezra's eyes, the way my heart felt like it had been hollowed out. Marcus listened without interrupting, then leaned back in his chair. You've been carrying this alone for too long, D. Maybe this is the push you needed. I didn't feel pushed. I felt shattered. That afternoon I wandered the streets of Jackson Heights, earbuds in but no music playing, just the noise of the city keeping me company. Every couple I passed, holding hands, laughing, unafraid, felt like a personal accusation. Had I really been that naive? By evening I was back at Marcus's, staring at my phone. 3 missed calls from Ezra. 1 text, come home. I love you. The words blurred on the screen. Love. What did that even mean when it came with so many conditions? The next 3 days blurred together. I called in sick to the design studio, something I had never done in 6 years. My boss texted back immediately, take all the time you need. Apparently my face at the last team meeting had already given away that something was wrong. I spent hours in Marcus's guest room replaying every moment of our relationship like a movie I couldn't turn off. The night Ezra surprised me with tickets to a Broadway show and we held hands in the dark theater. The weekend we drove upstate to see the leaves change and he told me I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. All of it felt tainted now, like beautiful paintings covered in graffiti. On the 4th day Ezra showed up at Marcus's door. I don't know how he found the address. He looked exhausted, tie loosened, hair messy in a way he never allowed in public. Marcus let him in but stayed close, arms crossed like a bodyguard. Ezra didn't even acknowledge him. His eyes were locked on me. Damien, 5 minutes. Please. I nodded and we stepped outside onto the stoop. The autumn sun was warm on my skin, but I felt cold inside. I'm sorry, he started immediately. I was an idiot. Those guys, they don't matter. You matter. He reached for my hand, but I kept them in my pockets. Then why couldn't you say it? He swallowed hard. Because I'm scared. My parents are coming to visit next month. Dad's already asking why I don't have a girlfriend. If they find out. His voice broke. For the first time I saw the fear wasn't just about his job. It was bone-deep, generational. I wanted to pull him close, to tell him we would figure it out together. But something inside me had shifted. I can't keep being your secret, Ezra. Not anymore. He stared at me like I had spoken in another language. What are you saying? I'm saying I need time to figure out who I am without constantly shrinking myself to fit into your world. The words came out steadier than I expected. He stepped back as if I had pushed him. You're leaving me? I didn't answer right away. The truth was I didn't know. All I knew was that the man who had denied me in front of strangers wasn't the same one I had fallen in love with. Or maybe he was, and I had been too blind to see it. That night I went back to our apartment to get more clothes. Ezra wasn't there. I found a note on the kitchen counter. I love you enough to give you space. But please don't give up on us. I folded it carefully and slipped it into my wallet. Then I packed another bag and left the key on the hook by the door. As I walked down the hallway toward the elevator, I realized something that scared me more than anything else. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel like I was running away. I felt like I was finally walking toward something real. even if I had no idea what that something was yet. The weeks that followed were a strange kind of limbo. I crashed at Marcus's place longer than either of us expected, turning his guest room into a makeshift studio with my laptop and drawing tablets spread across the bed. Work helped keep my mind busy. The studio had landed a big rebrand project for a queer-owned coffee chain in Chelsea, and my boss assigned me lead designer. Every morning I poured myself into color palettes and typography, trying to create something vibrant and unapologetic. It felt like the only part of my life that still made sense. Ezra texted every few days. Nothing dramatic, just check-ins. Hope you're okay. Saw that new exhibit at MoMA you would love. Miss your terrible pancakes. I replied politely but kept distance. One night I almost caved. It was raining hard, the kind of downpour that makes New York feel like it's underwater. I was scrolling through old photos on my phone when his name lit up the screen. Can we talk? In person. I stared at the message for 20 minutes before typing back a single word. Tomorrow. We met at our favorite diner in the village, the one with the cracked vinyl booths and endless coffee refills. Ezra was already there when I arrived, nursing a black coffee and looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usual sharp lawyer facade had cracks, stubble on his jaw, shirt wrinkled at the cuffs. You look good, he said softly as I slid into the seat across from him. I managed a half-smile. You look exhausted. He laughed without humor. Yeah, the apartment's too quiet without you. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about the promotion, he got it, but the partners had made comments about settling down that made his stomach turn. I told him about the coffee chain project, how the owners wanted their logo to scream pride without saying the word. For a moment it felt like old times, easy conversation flowing between us. Then he reached across the table and took my hand. Come home, Damien. We'll figure out how to do this better. I promise. His thumb traced circles on my skin, and part of me wanted to say yes so badly it hurt. But the memory of that party still burned fresh. I need more than promises this time. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. I know. I'm working on it. Therapy even started last week. That surprised me. Ezra had always dismissed therapy as talking to strangers about feelings. If he was willing to do that, maybe he really was trying. We left the diner without resolving anything, but the hug goodbye lingered longer than it should have. Walking back to Marcus's through the wet streets, I realized I still loved him. The question was whether love was enough when it came wrapped in fear. Marcus didn't judge when I told him about the meeting. Instead, he suggested something radical. Why don't you come to my sister's place in Vermont for the weekend? Get out of the city. Clear your head. His sister Leah ran a small bed and breakfast in a town so tiny it barely showed up on maps. I agreed before I could overthink it. The drive up was peaceful, leaves turning gold and red along the highway. When I arrived, Leah greeted me with a hug like we'd known each other forever. Marcus told me you're going through it. My house is yours, no questions asked. The weekend was exactly what I needed. I hiked the trails behind the inn, sat by the lake watching the sunset, and for the first time in months felt my shoulders relax. On the last night, Leah joined me on the porch with 2 glasses of wine. You know, she said, my brother came out to our parents when he was 16. They didn't handle it well at first. Took years for them to come around. But he never stopped being himself. I stared at the dark water. Ezra's family isn't like that. She shrugged. Families change. Or sometimes we have to change the family we choose. Her words stuck with me the whole drive back to New York. Back in the city, things at work picked up speed. The coffee chain loved my concepts and wanted to expand the campaign to include social media graphics celebrating community events. One afternoon, my boss pulled me into her office. You've been killing it lately. Whatever's going on in your personal life, it's fueling some of your best work. I laughed it off, but inside I wondered if she was right. Pain had sharpened something in me, made colors brighter and ideas bolder. Ezra and I started meeting for coffee every other week. Neutral ground, no pressure. He told me about coming out to one colleague, a quiet paralegal who had simply nodded and said, "About time. Small victories, but they mattered." I shared stories from Vermont, how the quiet had helped me hear my own thoughts again. One evening, as we walked out of the cafe, he stopped under a street lamp. "I miss you every single day. Not just the relationship, the way you make me want to be better." I looked at him, really looked, and saw the man I fell in love with still there, fighting to get out. But then came the phone call that changed everything. My mother called from Seattle sounding worried. "Your father isn't doing well, honey. The doctors think it's his heart again. We need you home for a bit." I booked the flight that night. When I told Ezra, he offered to come with me. "As your friend," he added quickly. I almost said yes. Instead, I shook my head. This is something I need to do alone. The truth was simpler. I didn't want to explain our complicated status to my parents right now. Not when everything felt so fragile. The flight to Seattle gave me too much time to think. By the time I landed, I had made a decision. Whatever happened with Ezra, I couldn't keep living in the shadows. My father was stable but weak when I arrived at the hospital. Mom hugged me tight. "He's been asking for you." In the quiet room, I sat by his bed and held his hand. He looked at me with those tired blue eyes and said, "You've always been the strong one, Damien. Whatever you're facing back in New York, don't let it break you." I didn't tell him about Ezra. Not yet. But his words planted a seed. Back in my childhood bedroom that night, surrounded by old posters and trophies, I opened my laptop and started writing. Not for work, for myself. The words poured out. The party, the diner, the lake in Vermont, the fear I had carried for years. By morning, I had 10 pages. It wasn't a novel, wasn't even coherent yet. But it was honest. And for the first time since that terrible night, I felt like I was beginning to find my voice again. The weeks in Seattle stretched into a month. My father's recovery was slow but steady, and being home gave me a perspective I hadn't realized I needed. Mornings I helped Mom in the garden, pulling weeds and listening to her talk about neighborhood gossip. Afternoons I sat with Dad watching old baseball games, the kind of comfortable silence that only happens between people who have known each other forever. Evenings I wrote. The document on my laptop grew to 50 pages, raw and unfiltered. I titled it simply Shadows, because that's what our relationship had become. Something beautiful but always half-hidden. Ezra called every evening. The conversations were different now, lighter in some ways, heavier in others. He told me about a big case he was working on, pro bono work for an LGBTQ youth center downtown. "It's the first time I felt like my job actually matters," he admitted one night. I could hear the pride in his voice, mixed with something new, peace. I told him about Dad's progress and the writing. He didn't push for details, just said, "I'm proud of you." Those 3 words landed differently than they used to. They didn't feel like pressure anymore. They felt like support. One weekend Marcus flew out to visit. We spent Saturday hiking in the Cascades, the air crisp with pine. Halfway up the trail he stopped and looked at me. "You've changed, Dee. In a good way. Stronger." I laughed it off at first, but later by the campfire I told him the truth. "I think I'm ready to go back to New York. But not the same way." He nodded like he already knew. "You deserve to be loved out loud." The words echoed in my head the whole flight home. Landing at JFK felt surreal. The city noise wrapped around me like a familiar blanket, but I was different inside. I had sublet a small studio in Williamsburg through a friend of Marcus's. Nothing fancy, just a place that was mine. Moving in took one afternoon and a U-Haul. When the last box was unpacked, I stood in the empty space and breathed. No shared closet, no careful choreography of hiding. Just me. Ezra wanted to see the new place immediately. I invited him over for dinner on Friday. He showed up with flowers and a bottle of the red wine I liked. We cooked pasta together in the tiny kitchen, bumping elbows and laughing like we hadn't in months. After dinner we sat on the floor because I didn't have a couch yet, and he told me about coming out to his parents over the phone. Dad hung up. Mom cried. But they didn't disown me. His voice was steady, but I saw the tremor in his hands. I reached over and took them. That's huge, Ezra. We didn't kiss that night. It wasn't the right time. Instead we talked until 3 in the morning about everything we had been too scared to say before. How the secrecy had poisoned us slowly. How much we still cared. When he left, he paused at the door. I'm not asking you to come back yet. I just want to keep doing this, being honest. I nodded. Me too. Work exploded in the best way. The coffee chain campaign went viral on social media, and suddenly my inbox was full of inquiries from other queer-owned businesses. I hired a part-time assistant and started dreaming bigger, maybe my own studio one day. The writing continued too. I joined a small writing group in Brooklyn, all LGBTQ creators sharing pieces around a big wooden table every Wednesday. Hearing others read their stories made mine feel less lonely. But life wasn't all smooth. One Tuesday, I ran into one of the guys from that awful party at a gallery opening. He recognized me immediately. Hey, aren't you Ezra's roommate? The word hit like a slap. I smiled tightly. Actually, I'm his ex-boyfriend. The guy's face went through several expressions before settling on awkward respect. Oh, sorry, man. Didn't know. That night I called Ezra and told him what happened. He was quiet for a long moment. I'm done hiding, Damien. Next time someone asks, I'll tell them the truth myself. The real test came 2 weeks later. Ezra's firm was throwing its annual holiday party. This time at a rooftop venue in Midtown with views of the skyline. He asked me to come. As my date. No more roommate bullshit. My stomach flipped. Part of me wanted to run. The other part, the part that had spent months rebuilding, said yes. I bought a new suit and spent way too long picking a tie. When he picked me up, he looked at me like I was the only person in the city. You look incredible. The party was everything I remembered. Loud music, expensive drinks, lawyers networking like it was an Olympic sport. But this time Ezra kept his hand on the small of my back as we walked in. When his boss approached, Ezra didn't hesitate. This is Damien, my partner. The words hung in the air like fireworks. His boss blinked, recovered with a professional smile, and shook my hand. Nice to meet you. No jokes, no awkwardness. Just acceptance. Later on the dance floor, under strings of twinkling lights, Ezra pulled me close. Thank you for giving me another chance to do this right. I rested my forehead against his. Thank you for fighting for us. The music swelled around us, but all I could feel was the steady beat of his heart against mine. For the first time in months, the future didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like something we were building together, one honest moment at a time. Christmas in New York that year felt magical in a way I hadn't experienced since childhood. Snow dusted the sidewalks like powdered sugar, and the windows along Fifth Avenue glowed with holiday displays. Ezra and I spent Christmas Eve at my new studio apartment, cooking a simple dinner of roast chicken and watching old movies. No big parties, no pretending. Just us, the tree we had picked out together at the lot in Union Square, and the quiet understanding that we were finally on the same page. His parents had softened surprisingly fast after the initial shock. His mom started sending me care packages, homemade cookies and notes that said, "We're praying for both of you." His dad still struggled, but at least he was trying. I flew to Seattle for New Year's to see my own family, and this time I brought Ezra. Introducing him as my partner felt natural, like slipping into a favorite sweater. Dad shook his hand firmly. Take care of my boy. Mom hugged him like he was already family. On the plane ride home, Ezra squeezed my hand. That went better than I expected. I smiled. They love who I love. Work continued to thrive. The studio signed 2 new clients, both nonprofits focused on LGBTQ youth. I designed a campaign for a shelter in Harlem that ended up featured in the New York Times. My writing group encouraged me to submit a short piece to a literary magazine. To my shock, it was accepted. The published essay was about the night of the party, the moment everything cracked open and how pain can sometimes be the beginning of truth. I didn't use real names, but Ezra read it anyway. He finished and looked up with tears in his eyes. "This is beautiful and honest. I'm so proud of you." Spring brought new challenges. Ezra's firm faced a scandal when one of the senior partners was accused of discriminatory practices. The office was tense, and Ezra found himself in the middle of internal investigations. Some colleagues who had been friendly suddenly distanced themselves. One afternoon he came home. Yes, we had moved back in together by then, and dropped his briefcase by the door. "I think I need to leave the firm." I set down my sketchbook. "What?" He sank onto the couch. "I can't keep working somewhere that doesn't value people like us. Like me." We talked late into the night. He had been offered a position at a smaller firm that specialized in civil rights cases. Less money, more meaning. I supported him completely. 2 weeks later, he gave notice. The day he walked out of the old office for the last time, I met him at our favorite pizza place. He looked lighter already. "Feels like I can breathe again." Summer arrived hot and sticky. We took our first real vacation together, no hiding, no separate rooms. A week in Provincetown on Cape Cod. The little beach town was full of rainbow flags and couples holding hands openly. We walked the dunes at sunrise, ate lobster rolls by the water, and danced at a drag show one night until our feet hurt. One evening on the beach, Ezra got down on one knee. Not with a ring, just a simple question. "Will you keep building this life with me?" Out loud. Every day. I said yes before he finished speaking. We didn't need a big proposal. We needed each other. Back in the city, life settled into a rhythm that felt right. I expanded the studio, hired 2 more designers. Ezra thrived at the new firm, winning his first big case defending a transgender teen's right to play on the school soccer team. We started hosting small dinners with friends Marcus and his girlfriend, people from my writing group, colleagues from Ezra's new office. No more secrets. The apartment filled with laughter and real conversation instead of careful silence. But growth isn't linear. One night in late August, I woke up from a nightmare about the party. I sat on the edge of the bed, heart racing, while Ezra slept peacefully beside me. The old fear crept in. What if it all falls apart again? What if love isn't enough? I slipped out to the living room and opened my laptop. The document Shadows was still there. I started typing a new chapter, this time about forgiveness, not just of him but of myself for staying silent so long. By morning, the fear had receded. Writing had become my anchor. Fall brought another milestone. My essay collection was accepted by a small publisher. The advance wasn't huge, but the validation meant everything. At the launch party in a cozy bookstore in the West Village, Ezra stood beside me as I read from the first chapter. When I finished, the audience clapped, and he pulled me into a hug right there in front of everyone. "You did it," he whispered, looking out at the faces. Friends, family who had flown in, strangers who had connected with my words. I realized something profound. The man who had been denied in front of a room full of people had become someone who could stand in front of a room full of people and tell his truth without shame. Winter returned, and with it came the kind of cold that cuts through coats and makes you appreciate every warm light in the city. Ezra and I had been living openly for over a year now, but life still tested us in unexpected ways. His brother, the youth pastor from Texas, announced he was coming to New York for a conference. The visit carried years of unspoken tension. Ezra paced the apartment for days beforehand. "What if he can't accept this?" I reminded him gently. "You've already done the hardest part. The rest is up to him." The dinner we hosted was awkward at first. His brother sat across from us, eyes flicking between our joined hands and the framed photo of us on the beach in Provincetown. Conversation stayed surface level until dessert. Then Ezra set down his fork. I need you to know this isn't a phase. Damien is my life. His brother was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. I don't understand it all, but you're my brother. That doesn't change. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was a bridge. We walked him to the subway afterward, and for the first time in years Ezra didn't look like he was carrying the weight of the world. My own family faced its challenges too. My sister got engaged to a guy from her church who wasn't exactly thrilled about having a gay brother-in-law. Holiday plans became complicated. Instead of forcing everyone together, we created new traditions. Ezra and I hosted a Friendsgiving in November with chosen family Marcus, Leah from Vermont, my writing group, Ezra's new colleagues. The table was loud and messy and perfect. Someone brought a ridiculous turkey-shaped centerpiece, and we laughed until our sides hurt. That night, as we cleaned up together, Ezra kissed my temple. This is what family feels like. Work brought its own high points and low points. The studio won a National Design Award for the coffee chain campaign. I flew to Chicago for the ceremony, Ezra by my side in a rented tux. Standing on stage accepting the trophy, I looked out at the audience and thought about the scared version of myself from 2 years ago. The one who had packed a bag and walked out. I dedicated the award to everyone still finding the courage to live their truth. The applause that followed felt like healing. But not everything was celebration. In February, Ezra received a letter from his hometown church. His parents had been asked to step down from leadership positions because of their son's lifestyle. The news hit him hard. He spent 3 days barely speaking, replaying every conversation from his childhood. I sat with him through the silence, bringing soup and holding him when the tears finally came. I never wanted to hurt them, he whispered one night. I kissed his forehead. You didn't choose their prejudice. You chose honesty. Slowly he started writing letters back, long, thoughtful ones explaining his journey without apology. It was his way of fighting for the family he still loved while protecting the life we had built. Spring brought renewal in more ways than one. We bought our first place together, a 2-bedroom in Astoria with a tiny balcony overlooking the park. Moving day was chaos. Boxes everywhere, Marcus directing traffic like a general, friends carrying furniture up 4 flights of stairs. When the last box was inside and everyone had left, we stood in the empty living room. Ezra took my hand. We made it. I pulled him close. We did more than make it. We built it. The writing collection launched in April. The bookstore event sold out. People lined up to get signed copies, some sharing how my words had helped them come out to their own families. One young guy, barely 20, told me through tears that reading my essay gave him the courage to leave an abusive home. I hugged him and fought back my own tears. Ezra waited patiently by the signing table, pride shining in his eyes. Later that night, we celebrated with champagne on our new balcony. Stars were visible above the city glow. Remember when you thought this life was impossible? He asked. I laughed softly. Yeah. Turns out impossible just took longer than I expected. Summer brought the biggest test yet. Ezra's firm took on a high-profile case defending a same-sex couple denied adoption rights in a conservative state. The media attention was intense. Reporters camped outside our building, and old colleagues from his previous firm started leaving snide comments online. One night, we got a threatening letter slid under the door. Ezra wanted to call the police immediately. I stopped him. This is exactly what they want, fear. Instead, we sat down and wrote a statement together, posted it on social media. It went viral. Support poured in from all over the country. The case ended up winning in court, setting a precedent that made national news. Through it all, we leaned on each other. Late nights talking strategy, early mornings making coffee before court appearances, quiet weekends escaping to the beach when the pressure got too much. The experience deepened us in ways I hadn't imagined possible. One evening after a particularly grueling day, Ezra looked at me across the dinner table. I used to think hiding would protect us. Now I know being seen is what makes us strong. I reached for his hand. And loving you out loud is the easiest thing I've ever done. Autumn painted the city in rich golds and reds again, marking 3 full years since that night at the party that had shattered everything. We were different people now, stronger, more honest, unafraid. The adoption case had led to more work for Ezra's firm, and my studio had grown to 8 employees with a waiting list of clients. Life felt full in the best possible way. One crisp October afternoon, we took a walk through Central Park, the same paths where we had shared that first secret kiss years ago. Leaves crunched under our feet as we held hands openly, no longer caring who saw. Ezra stopped by the same bench where we had once sat whispering about the future. Remember how scared I was back then? I nodded. I remember how scared we both were. He turned to face me, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. This time it wasn't just a question. Inside was a simple platinum band. Damien, will you marry me? Not because we have to prove anything, but because I want to spend every day choosing you out loud. Tears blurred my vision as I said yes. The park around us seemed to brighten, strangers smiling as they walked past. We didn't need a big proposal or perfect timing. We just needed each other. The wedding was small and intentional. 50 people in a rooftop garden in Brooklyn with string lights and wildflowers. Marcus was my best man. Leah from Vermont read a poem, and Ezra's mom walked him down the aisle with tears in her eyes. My parents sat in the front row beaming. When we exchanged vows, I looked into the eyes of the man who had once denied me and saw only love and pride. I choose you every single day, I said. No more shadows. His voice was steady as he replied, You taught me how to live in the light. After the ceremony, we danced under the stars while the city hummed below us. Ezra pulled me close during the slow song. Thank you for not giving up on me. I kissed him softly. Thank you for becoming the man I always knew you could be. Life after the wedding settled into a beautiful rhythm. We adopted a rescue dog named Scout who loved chasing leaves in the park. I published my second book, this one a full memoir about the journey from denial to freedom. Ezra's firm expanded its LGBTQ practice, and he started mentoring young lawyers still struggling with their own identities. We traveled when we could, weekends in Montreal, a month in Italy where we renewed our vows on a hillside overlooking the sea. But the greatest gift wasn't the success or the adventures. It was the quiet mornings making coffee together, the way we could talk about anything without fear, the knowledge that we had chosen each other not despite the world but in spite of it. The boy who had stood alone at that party was now a man who stood beside his husband in every room, every conversation, every future plan. Looking back, I realized the denial wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the most honest version of ourselves we could become. The pain forced us to grow, to fight, to choose truth over comfort. And in the end, that choice led us here, to a life filled with love that doesn't need to hide. True or false? Can hiding your true self ever lead to genuine happiness?